Hello everybody, my name is Corey Motley and I am going to do a little workflow Lightroom video today. I am going to edit maybe like 1 or 2 or 3 pictures and just kind of go through my workflow, how I like to edit, what I like to do, how I like to tone pictures and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't really consider this like a tutorial really, because I'm not going to be focusing on any specific thing, such as like exposure or white balance or anything like that. And I also don't really consider myself like a professional photographer. I've been using Lightroom for about a year, and I've been shooting action photography for about a year and a half. I've got a little bit of background in like press photography and visual storytelling from some classes in college that I took a while back. So I shoot in manual. I shoot everything in manual. I shoot on a Nikon D3300, which is pretty much the entry-level Nikon camera. So if you're watching this video and you're someone who thinks that you need to go out and buy like a $5,000 camera to take great pictures, I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. I get what I would consider pretty good images from literally the entry-level Nikon camera that's about almost 2 years old at this point. I think the newest one right now is the 3400, and I'm sure they're probably going to come out with like the 3500 next year or something like that. But I shoot on a Nikon D3300. I use all the pictures that I'm going to go through here. I use a 14 millimeter. It's a Rokinon 14 millimeter f2.8 lens, if I'm not mistaken. So it's got a little bit of distortion, but it's not that bad. I actually really like the lens because it's pretty wide for action photography. I just prefer the way it shoots. So basically, I'm just going to go through a few pictures and kind of edit them the way I like to edit them. I'm going to talk through how I edit. I'm going to talk through the order that I do things. And I want to clarify that this is by no means like me saying that this is how you should edit your pictures. This is just the way that I like to do it. I'm also open to any and all criticism. So if you happen to be watching this video, I doubt very many people are going to watch this video because I only have like 1 subscriber on YouTube or something like that. But if you stumble upon this video and you have any input or any, any thoughts or feedback about the way that I edit, I'm totally all ears as long as you're not an asshole. So let's just jump in. Right here, I have a handful of shots that I took out. I primarily shoot skateboarding and parkour. I went out on a skateboarding shoot the other day and photographed a couple dudes in New Orleans. And these are just some of the images that I got. Right now I'm in Lightroom. I'm in the library module because I've just imported all these pictures. I've only edited 1 of them so far. I also, just to clarify, I edit on a 2011 MacBook Air, so the computer that I edit on is a little bit old and it's not very powerful. So that's just the computer that I have, and it's the computer I use. So I'm going to go through a couple shots here. I'm not really sure which ones I want to edit yet. Usually what I do is I go to the Develop tab, and then I just use the arrow keys to kind of arrow over, and I decide which pictures I like the best and which ones I want to edit. I think I'm going to do this one. This is a guy named Blair who I shot skateboarding downtown a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is crop it just a little bit. There's kind of a lot of negative space down here. There's a lot of negative space up here. If there's some pretty interesting like cloud work going on in the skies, then I'm very interested in doing more of like a rule of thirds kind of edit where I can really capture the sky and capture the clouds. I really like clouds and photography and good skies, but if there's not any cloud coverage or anything going on, then usually I just try to crop it down a little bit and try to keep the focus on the person in the photo. So I'm going to keep Blair centered right here. And the first thing that I do if I have an image that is pretty well exposed, I mean, this one, he's got a little bit of shadows on his face, but it was a daytime shot. It's pretty well exposed. It's not some grimy indoor shot. The first thing I like to do with these kind of pictures is I will always go down to the point curve, and instead of linear, I take it to medium contrast. That just gives me kind of a base level contrast for darkening up the picture a little bit, giving it a little more depth, and that's just a way that I like to start. I also like to use the slash key that's right under delete and right above enter on the keyboard if you're a Mac user. If you press it once, it goes before to show you what the picture looks like with no edits, and if you press it again, it takes you to the current build of the picture. This is something I do all the time when I'm editing. I always go back and forth and look at how did it look before, what does it look like now, how far have I come, that kind of thing. It's something I do a lot. And alternatively, you can do that up here too for each sort of item that you edit on, like from tone curve or color saturation or split toning. You can click this little notch over here and it'll turn off just that thing that you've done. So say if I did color saturation and tone curve, I could turn just the tone curve back off and on, but it would leave the color saturation. So I'm just going to leave that. I usually do that with like split toning, which I'll explain later, just to see what it looks like before and after. But I always do the medium contrast first, just to give the picture a little bit more depth, and then I go down to dehaze. And there's two ways that I do the sliders on editing. Sometimes I'll just click the amount button or the value over here, and I use the plus and minus keys to kind of take it up and down. Or sometimes I will just click and drag the slider and just take it up and take it down and kind of fine tune it right where I want it. Because generally, if you use the plus and minus keys, it takes things up and down by values of 5, and sometimes I want it to be greater than or less than 5. But in general, on dehaze, I usually take it up to about 15. In dehaze, I don't know what the technical definition of what dehaze is, but in my opinion, it gives a little bit of sharpness and clarity to the picture. It also gives a little bit of saturation to certain colors. And it can also warm up the pictures a little bit, which is why I do it before I do white balance, because I like to get sort of the dehaze in there first and then go back and tone the pictures cooler if I need to. So I always take dehaze up first, and then I will go back to white balance. And at this point, I start from the top and then just kind of start working my way down. And to be totally honest, I tend to edit pictures pretty similarly most of the time. The only shots that I edit different are like gym photography. Like I shoot in a parkour gym sometimes, and the lighting is not very good and my camera doesn't handle the darkness in there very good. So I will shoot fast and dark, and I will try to lighten the pictures as much as I can in Lightroom, and that'll kind of change the way I edit. But as far as outdoor shots go, I pretty much edit them the same, more or less, each time I edit them. So I start with highlights. I ignore exposure and contrast first, because instead of doing contrast, that's why I do the point curve thing. And I take care of highlights and shadows in here. So highlights, I start here. Usually I tend to shoot a little overexposed sometimes, so I can drag the highlights down to kind of give some more detail back and blown out parts of the picture. And this picture isn't really overexposed, so it's fine, but it just gave me a little bit of extra color and detail right around here. And then shadows, I'm gonna pull this up to get some of his face back in the picture and get some of the sort of lighten up some of the details in there. And this isn't a science either. I mean, everybody likes to edit photos a different way. There's no right or wrong way to do it. This is just the way that I like to do it. And then when you get down to whites and blacks, one helpful tip is if you hold the Alt or Option key while you click, it turns the whole image white if you click, or the whole image black if you click on the whites. And then I take it up. As soon as you see some color bleeding through, that means you've got true whites in your picture. I like to back it off just a little bit. And then when I get down to black, I do the same thing. It turns the picture white. And then I like to push, instead of backing off on the black slider though, I like to push it a little bit more so I can get some extra depth in the picture, like maybe like that. So there's a before and after. You can see it's a little more colorful. It's a little deeper, I guess. And then on the presence menu, clarity is kind of a strange slider. It gives a lot of like sharpness to an image, but it also kind of desaturates things. Like if you push it up, it kind of gives it like a strange sort of Instagram filter looking dealio. I value clarity in pictures, but I like to keep it very low. So if I double click clarity over here, it takes it back down to 0. I usually bump up clarity to about 10 and leave it there. Sometimes I don't do it at all because I like sort of the sharpness and sort of the grit that it gives the picture, but I don't like to overdo it. And when it comes to vibrance and saturation, the difference between these two is saturation. If you push saturation up, it's going to saturate every color in the picture, period, all of it. So as you can see, it kind of makes the skin look orangier. It makes the sky look bluer. It makes his face look redder. He has some red undertones in his skin because he was, doing physical activity, and this really pushes those reds up. Meanwhile, if you pull it down, it just turns into a black and white image. It desaturates everything in the picture. So I actually don't use saturation very much unless it's in a very specific circumstance because it can be really weird with skin tones. But vibrance, on the other hand, only pushes colors that are not already saturated in the picture. So it can kind of bring some colors up that are a little more muted to begin with. And I like to push vibrance up just a little bit whenever I edit. So I'm going to leave it right at 13 for now. And then that's it so far. So I'm ready to move on. This is before, just as a reminder, and this is after. So you can see everything's much more saturated. It's a little sharper, a little grittier perhaps. And then I'm going to come down to region. And basically, this is sort of the same. The highlights, lights, darks, and shadows is very similar to the highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks up here, but it's kind of a little more fine-tuned. And so I basically just do the same thing up here that I did downstairs, that I did up there earlier. But if I pull the highlights down too much, I lose some of the detail in the sky. I lose a lot of the color in the sky. So right here, I'm actually just going to pull it down a tiny bit. The lights I'll bring up to get some more light in there. The darks I bring up a little bit, and then I push the shadows dark. This is sort of a general way of how I edit. Let me pull those back up a little bit. I'm actually going to pull the exposure up a tiny bit and leave it like that. I'm not going to do any color saturation toning right now. That's something that I usually do at the very end because I like to get everything together before I push individual colors, if I push them at all. I'm actually going to pull the saturation down overall a tiny bit, just one click down. And then split toning is something that took me a really long time to discover in Lightroom. I didn't really understand what it did until I watched some YouTube videos about it. But it gives the highlights and shadows in the picture a very small, like, tinted hue. And I tend to edit split tone pictures the same way just about every time, unless I'm going for a very specific look. And the way I do it is I take saturation up to 5. Usually I don't take it any higher than 5. And then I drag the slider until I get it right in the tone that I want. And usually I settle in right in the dark blue area, and then I do the same thing with shadows. I push it up to 5, the saturation, and then I pull the shadows up, pull those right about there, and then I always use this little switch over here to turn it off just to see what it looks like. And as you can see, split toning is very subtle. That's why I like to keep it at 5. I don't want to overdo it on split toning. In general, I use split toning almost as a color corrector, to be honest. Like if a picture is too warm, I can pull the saturation for highlights and shadows blue, and it'll kind of even it out. That's sort of how I use it. I don't know if that's the recommended way to use split toning, but that's how I deal with it. And I love split toning. It's one of my favorite things in Lightroom. And then we get down to sharpening and noise reduction. And sharpening, I tend to do the same thing just about every time, unless it's like a landscape shot or something like that. I always take the masking up to 5 because it gives me a nice little margin of error for what's going to be sharpened in the picture. A tip for masking is just like with the white and black values earlier, if you hold the Alt or Option key and click on it, it turns the picture white, and as you pull it up, the stuff that's gray is not going to be sharpened. So generally, you don't really need a sky to be sharpened in a picture, and that's kind of the first thing that gets dropped out of sharpening if you pull the masking up. So as a general rule, I just always pull the masking up to 5 and sort of let that be my margin of error for sharpening on the picture, so that way I can kind of leave the sky out of it. And then I tend to pull the sharpening up into the 70s, and then I take noise reduction up to about 15. Depending on the picture I'm shooting, I generally keep noise reduction between 10 and 20, maybe 25 if I'm feeling like it's extra gritty or something, because noise reduction will give you a certain amount of softness to your picture, but it sometimes can be too much, and it can make the picture look like a fluffy marshmallow rather than, a picture of a person. And this is something that I do with detail too. I switch it off and on just like I did with split toning to kind of see where the picture's at. I'm actually going to pull the sharpening down a tiny bit. I'm going to pull the luminance up one. I think that's where I like it. And then lens corrections, this is something important if you're using a wide lens like I have. Sometimes I need to do this at the beginning and I just forget to do it, or sometimes I prefer not to do it at all. But if I enable profile corrections, it shows what the picture, it sort of standardizes the picture so that it's not distorted from it being on a super wide lens. If I click it off, that's what it looked like before. This is after. See, because it's super wide, it kind of bends the curb a little bit, and it kind of blows the middle a little bit wide. I actually don't mind the way it looks here. Sometimes, depending on where the person's positioned in the photograph, it can make them look strange, like maybe make their nose look huge, or maybe make like the side of their head look, I don't know, like kind of concave. So I actually don't mind where it's at right here, so I'm just going to leave it and not really mess with it. I am, however, going to go over to manual lens correction and take vignette down just to center the eye in the picture. And then, gosh, I'm pretty sure I'm just about done with this picture. Sometimes I like to go back to dehaze and see what it looks like. I think I'm going to pull it down to 10. Let's check the tint and see what that'll do. Sometimes I like to use the tint and push it magenta a little bit because I feel like it gives the picture sort of like a nice, I don't know, just look overall. I'm going to pull the exposure up a little bit. This is the point where, because I have so many edits applied, that the picture, or that the computer starts to move a little bit slower. So here we have before, we have after. Before and after. I like where this is at. This picture is not blowing me away, to be honest, but I think it's good enough to be edited. It's just not, this picture, I'll be the first to say that this picture is not amazing. It's just like an alright picture. And I think we'll call this good. File, export. Whenever I export, I always do specific photos with the way that or specific folders with the way that I export. I don't really do anything special. I keep the quality up. I keep the resolution at 300 just in case I end up using these pictures for print in any way. I do have a little watermark that I put on my pictures. I used to do the sharpen for screen option, but sometimes it makes the pictures look really gritty and strange depending on how you're looking at them, whether if it's on a phone or on a computer or something like that. So I just stopped doing it because sometimes the pictures just look weird. And then I export. And generally this is when it takes forever to export. Sometimes it takes about 30 seconds to a minute to export pictures, and I'm sure because I'm using capture software right now on my computer that it's going to take a little bit longer. It pretty much slows down everything on the computer whenever I'm exporting stuff, so I tend to just want to wait until it's done before I do any more edits. I think I'm going to edit this shot real quick. This should be an easy one. So here we have Terrell We have Blair. He was putting his new skateboard together, his new deck, and his trucks and wheels and all that stuff with his tools. So I'm basically going to do about the same thing, probably a little bit quicker this time. Take the point curve down, move the dehaze up a little bit, keep it at 10 right here. Pull the temperature down a couple clicks. And then I'm going to jump into, let's see, highlights. I feel like I don't need to do much with the highlights. Basically all this is doing is bringing some of the sky back over here, which is not really that valuable to me. So I'm just going to pull it down some, pull the shadows up so I can get some of the detail back in Terrell's shirt. This is a problem I notice whenever I photograph people who either wear all white or all black, is that you tend to have to expose for their faces or their arms and then try to compensate in Lightroom after. Because say if I exposed for the black in his shirt, his face would be really blown out. Everything else in the picture might be really blown out. So I can just save that with shadows here to get some of the detail back in his shirt. Not that this detail is like super valuable for the shot, but it's better than just having like a giant black hole right here. And then whites, I'm going to do the same thing, pull it up until I get some true whites, and then back it off. Blacks, do the same thing, just deepen it up a little bit. And here we have before, after, so nothing drastic. Clarity, move that up a couple notches. Vibrance might be a little weird here. I like Vibrance because it just kind of like gives some life back to the picture without oversaturating stuff until it looks ridiculous. Because I notice in my gym photography a lot, whenever I shoot in the gym, because I have to shoot fast and dark, once I lighten the image up, I kind of lose a lot of the sort of like color in it. And then I can push Vibrance up and it really like brings some of that life back to the picture. It's really nice. Move down to split toning again. Right about there. The shadows will be more prominent here because this picture has a lot of shadows in it. So you can see how it just kind of changes the tone. I just really like the overall color tone that split toning does for pictures, because here it's a little more green, and then once I apply it, it's a little more blue and pink. And it's super subtle, but it's one of those things that I just love doing. I cannot live without split toning. And sharpening, I'm going to pull that back up to about 70. Noise reduction, I'm going to go... Sometimes noise reduction sets in so subtly that it's hard to tell what it's doing, so I like to switch this off and back on. Because you can tell like right here kind of where his beard is a little bit, and some of like his face, like the pores on his face. Like there, it's a little more grainy, and then there it just smooths it out just a little bit. I just really like the way that works, but you can also overdo it and it can look ridiculous. I'm going to pull the vignette down. I like to vignette a little bit just to pull the eye into the center of the photo. And really that might be it. This picture, let me pull the tint pink a little bit and see what that looks like. Yeah, I like that. So that's the nice thing about Lightroom too, is that say any of the steps I made, I can go over here to this tab, and I can go back in time on any of the edits I've done. I can take it all the way back to the original import, all the way back to, you know, anywhere I want in here, and I can start from any step. So nothing you're doing on your images is permanent, and these don't affect the original image files at all. So that's the before, after. See, I like that. That looks better. Boom, that was easy. Export. I think I'm gonna do one last action shot and then probably call it. I think I'm gonna do this one. I think this might be my favorite picture I took all day. It's a nice vertical of Terrell ollieing over a stationary skateboard. The shitty thing about this picture is that the sun was over here and it was hitting his back, and I much rather would have been sitting over here and having him ollie the other way so I could see his face and the sun would have been hitting his face. But I didn't ask him to pose. Whenever I shoot skateboarding, I generally don't ask people to do things. I just kind of am there shooting, almost like a journalist, like a photojournalist maybe. So I'm sure if I had asked him to, you know, ollie the other way, he totally would have done it. But I kind of just like to let skateboarders do their thing, and I just kind of hang around and shoot. So let's see what we can do with this, because I know I can, if I lighten up the shadows, it'll brighten him up, so that's not a big deal. Because right now he looks super dark and a little bit ridiculous. Push the tint up. So let's pull the highlights. It'll give me the clouds back. See, I like the cloud coverage over here. I might do something with that in a little bit. Then if I pull the shadows up, see, there, Terrell's back. Boom. Okay, so I can pull the shadows up. Alternatively, I could go up here to this adjustment brush tool, and I could just paint all over him and pull the shadows up that way without deterring anything else in the photograph. But to be honest, it doesn't really bother me the way this looks right now, and I'm also I'm feeling kind of lazy about this picture. So I'm just going to kind of edit this quickly. But the good news is that I can always go back if I want to. So I'm going to deepen it up by pulling the black down. So here we have before and after, before and after. I like this picture. Clarity, bump it up a couple notches like usual. Vibrance, let's see what this does. See, that's really saturating the blue sky up there. And what's cool about this is, say, okay, I'm gonna pull this up. The sky looks a little bit ridiculous here. I mean, it's very blue up there. One thing I can do is go down here. Well, actually, let me do this first. Because if I pull the highlights down, it's going to back that sky off a little bit. I could also do color desaturation to pull it down a little bit more. It's just nice because you have to think about ways that you edit pictures in Lightroom and what you can do to compensate for certain adjustments that you make. So like here, like I'm feeling pretty good about this. I feel like split toning will really help this picture a lot. Split toning, I'm actually going to pull the split toning pink a little bit more here rather than blue, because the picture is very blue toned already, so pulling it pink will give me some of the warmth back. So there's before, after, it's bluer, it's pinker. I like that, and I enjoy that. Put the masking up 5 like usual. Take the sharpening, take it up to about 70, and usually I keep it between 70 and 80. I'm actually going to pull it down just a little bit, pull it to 70. Actually, I'm going to pull it down a little bit more. Let's do noise reduction, take it up to 15. I'm a little bit nervous because I'm getting some... Wait till it focuses. I'm getting a little bit of blue right here, which actually that isn't bad. It looks really thick here, which I might be able to solve that. I think it's taking too long to render. Just leave that where it is. Because with the distortion over here, you can pull it down, and sometimes that helps. I don't really know if that's helping or not. Vignette down a little bit, really center the eyes on him. I could probably stand to crop this a little bit too, actually. Well, actually, maybe not. It's okay the way it is. I can always crop it later if I want. See, I sort of like the kind of pinkish hue that this picture has going on. I might actually push it a little bit more too. I like that a lot. I'm gonna pull the shadows up. Actually, let me try the adjustment brush and see what I can do here. So let me, I can go to lighten, dodge, and I'm just gonna paint. I'm gonna show selected mask overlay so I can see what I've painted. And I'm just gonna paint the dark areas of his clothes. This might end up looking awful, so I might actually not do this. But I'm gonna paint those, and I'm just gonna brighten that up a little bit and see what happens. So I'm gonna take the shadows and move them up. See how it just brightens up his clothes a little bit? And I can take probably blacks up too. Oh, see, that looks ridiculous. Okay, maybe just like a little bit. Maybe the exposure up a tiny bit. And this is really just kind of me playing, like maybe like that. And I can always go back and see what it looked like before too. So before, after, it just gives a little bit of the detail back to his clothes without messing up anything else in the picture. And I'm pretty okay with the way that looks. And I think that's it. Like, this is before, this is after, before, after. Lightened it up, gave it a little bit of a pink hue, tried to keep everything together. I think I'm gonna pull the contrast up a tiny bit. It's like I can never decide like what's good or what's not. And I think I will actually export that now. And that is it that I'm gonna do for today. Naturally, there is somebody with a weed eater right outside my window, so those sounds are probably coming through the microphone right now. And while that is happening, I'm just gonna go ahead and sign off. So thank you for watching this. If you picked up any tips, I hope you did. If you have any feedback or anything, I would appreciate it in the comments. If you have any questions, I will try to answer them. But thanks for watching, and I will try to do these pretty regularly. Fingers crossed that I will stick to it, and we'll see. I'll see you in the next one. So thanks for watching. Bye, guys.